You think you make rational decisions. You look at the evidence, weigh your options, calculate the risks. You tell yourself you're logical. You believe your choices make sense. But Daniel Kahneman spent 50 years proving you're wrong. Not wrong occasionally, wrong systematically, wrong in patterns so predictable he could map them like constellations. And here's the part that really gets uncomfortable. When you know about these patterns, you still fall for them. Every time. Even Kahneman himself fell for them. So what did this psychologist discover that was so powerful, it won him a Nobel Prize in economics without ever taking a single economics course? What made his work so revolutionary that it spawned an entire field and changed how we understand the human mind? 1934. A boy is born to Lithuanian Jewish parents living in France. His father dies during the Nazi occupation when Daniel is 10. The family hides, moves, survives. Young Daniel watches people. He studies faces. He notices how they behave under pressure. In 1946, the family moves to Palestine. Daniel Kahneman grows up in the future state of Israel, and in 1954, he enters Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Psychology. Not because of some grand plan, because a vocational test pointed him that direction. But here's what matters. During his mandatory military service in 1956, at 21 years old, he gets assigned to evaluate recruits for the Israeli Defense Forces. He builds an interview system. That system stays in use for decades. Already, before graduate school, Kahneman is seeing something wrong with human judgment. He's watching officers make predictions about soldiers based on gut feelings and being consistently wrong. The predictions feel right. They sound confident, and they're terrible. This bothers him a lot. He publishes research on attention, on how mental effort dilates your pupils, solid work, traditional cognitive psychology, nothing revolutionary yet. Then comes 1968, and with it, a colleague who will change everything. Also, this script is researched and factual, using sources from Kahneman's 1979 Econometrica paper that now has over 80,000 citations, his 2002 Nobel Prize autobiography, published by the Nobel Foundation, and the 1974 science paper that established the heuristics and biases program and has been cited over 21,000 times. Now back to the information. 3 years younger than Kahneman, military hero, outgoing where Kahneman is reserved, confident where Kahneman is self-critical, born in Haifa in 1937, brilliant mathematician, completely opposite personality. In the fall of 1968, they're both at Hebrew University. Kahneman is teaching a graduate seminar on applying psychology to real-world problems. He invites Tversky to speak to his class. Tversky presents research by Ward Edwards suggesting people are unconscious statisticians, that human guesses match mathematical probability. Kahneman disagrees immediately, not because Tversky presented it wrong, because Kahneman has seen the opposite with his own eyes. Those military interviews, all those confident predictions, all spectacularly wrong. They start talking after class. The conversation continues. Days become weeks. Weeks become months. They're meeting every afternoon in a small seminar room. They invent gambling problems and test them on each other. When they both choose the same answer, they assume it's universal. Then they test it on students. Almost always, the students make the same choices, the choices that violate logic, that contradict probability theory, that make no mathematical sense whatsoever. What they're discovering is this: humans don't think in probabilities, they think in stories. You ask someone, a disease will kill 600 people. You can save 200 for certain, or take a 1 in 3 chance to save all 600. 72% take the certain option, save 200. Now frame it differently. 400 will die for certain, or you take a 1 in 3 chance that nobody dies. Suddenly, 78% take the gamble, same numbers, identical mathematical outcome, opposite choice, just because you said save versus die. This is the framing effect, and it shouldn't exist if humans were rational. But it does exist, consistently, powerfully, across all demographics. Tversky and Kahneman published this in Science in 1981 as the Asian disease problem. Thousands of replications later, it still holds. Between 1971 and 1979, they're writing papers that will reshape economics. Their process is unusual, intense. Kahneman describes it as pure fun. They're finishing each other's thoughts, laughing constantly, testing intuitions, building experiments from arguments that feel wrong. They're inseparable. Colleagues call them soulmates. The papers start piling up. 1974. Judgment under uncertainty. Heuristics and biases hits science. It describes 3 mental shortcuts. Representativeness, judging probability by similarity. You meet someone who's shy and likes poetry, you assume librarian over farmer, even though there are way more farmers. Availability, judging frequency by ease of recall. Plane crashes feel common because they're memorable. Car crashes kill far more people but don't stick in memory the same way. anchoring, getting stuck on the first number you see. Then Kahneman asks two questions. First, is the percentage of African nations in the United Nations higher or lower than the number you just got? Second, what's your best guess of the actual percentage? The wheel is meaningless. Everyone knows it. The number has zero connection to UN membership. Should be ignored completely, but it's not. When the wheel lands on 10, participants guess an average of 25%. When it lands on 65, they guess 45%. The anchor pulls estimates 20 percentage points in completely arbitrary directions. This is published in their 1974 science paper, gets replicated hundreds of times. Different questions, different anchors, same result. The first number you see contaminates everything that follows. 5 seconds to calculate a product. Group 1 gets 1 times, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, 7 times, 8. Group 2 gets it reversed. 8 times, 7 times, 6 times, 5 times, 4 times, 3 times, 2 times 1. Not enough time to finish. Both groups estimate based on their first few calculations. Group 1, starting small, gives a median estimate of 512. Group 2, starting big, estimates 2,250. The correct answer is 40,320. Both groups are wildly wrong. But notice the pattern. Small numbers anchor you low, large numbers anchor you high. Even when you're doing the math yourself, this paper gets cited over 50,000 times. It becomes the foundation for an entire research program. Prospect theory, an analysis of decision under risk. Published in Econometrica. They worked on this for years, started sketching ideas back in the mid-70s. The paper appears in March 1979, page 263. It's dense, mathematical. It presents an alternative to expected utility theory, which has dominated economics for decades. Expected utility says people make rational calculations, multiply outcomes by probabilities, choose the highest expected value. Clean, logical. Wrong. Prospect theory says people don't think about final wealth states. They think about gains and losses relative to a reference point. And here's the asymmetry. Losses hurt roughly twice as much as equivalent gains feel good. You find $20, you feel good. You lose $20, you feel terrible. Not equally opposite feelings. Asymmetric. The loss stings harder. Kahneman and Tversky quantified this. The loss aversion coefficient, lambda, came out around 2.25 in their 1992 paper. Other studies confirm variations of this. Some find lambda closer to 2, some higher. But the pattern holds. Losses loom larger than gains. Like the endowment effect. Give someone a coffee mug, now offer to buy it back. They want way more to sell it than they would have paid to buy it 5 minutes earlier. Kahneman, Jack Netsch, and Richard Thaler document this in 1990. Median selling price is about twice the median buying price. Every single time they run the experiment. The mug didn't change. The owner's attachment shouldn't matter economically. But psychologically, once you own something, giving it up feels like a loss, and losses hurt. Sure thing. Faced with a sure loss of $200 or a 50% chance of losing $400, most take the gamble. Same probabilities, opposite risk preferences. This is called the reflection effect. It's documented throughout the 79 paper, tested across hundreds of subjects at Hebrew University in Michigan. Holds every time. Kahneman takes a fellowship at the Center for Advanced Study in the Behavioral Sciences at Stanford. Tversky is visiting Stanford's psychology department. They're both in California. They're completing the prospect theory paper, painstakingly, revising, testing formulas. The paper becomes legendary before it's even published. A draft circulates among economists in 1976 under the title Value Theory. They change it to Prospect Theory to avoid confusion. Kahneman later admits the new title was meaningless, but it stuck. The paper comes out and immediately starts getting cited. By 1980, behavioral economists are using it as a foundation. By 1990, it's reshaping finance theory. By 2000, it's part of every economics PhD program that cares about how humans actually behave. 1983, Psychological Review. It becomes the most famous example of what Tversky and Kahneman call the conjunction fallacy. Here's the setup. Linda is 31 years old, single, outspoken, and very bright. She majored in philosophy. As a student, she was deeply concerned with issues of discrimination and social justice, and also participated in anti-nuclear demonstrations. Which is more probable, Linda is a bank teller, or Linda is a bank teller and is active in the feminist movement? Over 80% choose the conjunction. Bank teller and feminist. Even though basic probability theory says the probability of two things both happening can never exceed the probability of either one alone, doesn't matter if you're a statistics novice or a statistics professor, 85% in some versions, 80% in others. The pattern holds. Stephen Jay Gould, the famous evolutionary biologist, writes about this problem years later. He says he knows intellectually that the single option is more probable, but there's a little voice in his head jumping up and down shouting, "She can't just be a bank teller, read the description." That voice is the representativeness heuristic. The conjunction fits the stereotype. Feels right. Overrides probability. Soviet Union invades Poland. Is that more probable than Soviet Union invades Poland and the United States breaks diplomatic relations? People pick the conjunction. They find that even when you make it completely transparent, Linda is a bank teller whether or not she is active in the feminist movement. 57% still commit the error. The wording reduces it slightly, doesn't eliminate it. Only when you frame it in frequencies instead of probabilities does it go away. Out of 100 people like Linda, how many are bank tellers versus how many are bank tellers and feminists? Suddenly, people get it right. This suggests humans evolved to think about frequencies, not abstract probabilities. We're counting how many times did this happen throughout evolutionary history. We're not calculating P of A and B equals P of A times P of B given A. That's modern mathematics. Our brains didn't evolve for that. When journalists write about their work, they often lead with Tversky. When universities offer positions, they offer to Tversky first. Kahneman is more self-critical, more prone to doubt. Tversky is confident, charismatic. The imbalance creates tension. By the early 1980s, according to Kahneman, the collaboration tapers off. They try to revive it, but it's not the same. The period when Kahneman publishes almost exclusively with Tversky ends in 1983, when he starts collaborating more with others, including Anne Treisman, a cognitive psychologist studying attention who becomes his second wife. Kahneman's book on attention from 1973 and Tversky's theory of similarity from 1977 are the only solo works that reach that citation level. Together, they're unstoppable. Apart, they're excellent. Together, they're historic. You're given $10 and told to split it with a stranger. If they accept your offer, you both keep your shares. If they reject it, you both get nothing. Rational choice theory says you should offer 1 cent and they should accept. 1 cent is better than nothing. But this never happens. Most offers are around 40 to 50%. Offers below 30% get rejected constantly. People sacrifice money to punish unfairness. This shouldn't happen in Homo economicus world, but it happens all the time. Thaler wins his own Nobel Prize in 2017 for behavioral economics, built on the foundation Kahneman and Tversky laid. Would have been shared if Tversky had lived. Nobel Prizes aren't awarded posthumously. When Kahneman wins in October 2002, he wins alone, alongside Vernon Smith for experimental economics. The Nobel citation reads, "For having integrated insights from psychological research into economic science, especially concerning human judgment and decision-making under uncertainty." But everyone knows this is Kahneman and Tversky's prize. The committee acknowledges as much. The entire citations list Tversky's contributions. Kahneman gives his Nobel lecture and dedicates it to Amos. He describes their collaboration as owning a goose that could lay golden eggs, a joint mind that was better than our separate minds. The book synthesizes 5 decades of research into one framework, System 1 and System 2, fast and slow thinking. He didn't invent these terms. Psychologists Keith Stanovich and Richard West proposed them years earlier, but Kahneman popularizes them, makes them accessible. System 1 is automatic, fast, intuitive. You see an angry face and instantly know the person is angry, no deliberation required. System 1 solves 2 plus 2 equals 4 without thinking. It recognizes patterns, makes snap judgments, operates constantly. You're using System 1 right now to understand these words without consciously parsing each letter. System 2 is deliberate, slow, effortful. You use System 2 for 17 times 24, for complex decisions, for overriding intuitions that feel wrong. System 2 requires attention, burns mental energy, gets tired. Most people think they operate primarily in System 2, rational, thoughtful, deliberate. Kahneman shows this is an illusion. System 1 runs the show. System 2 endorses System 1's suggestions most of the time without much scrutiny. It's lazy, resource-intensive, doesn't want to work unless absolutely necessary. Their System 2 is perfectly capable of analyzing the Linda problem correctly, but System 1 jumps in first with feminist bank teller feels right, and System 2 just nods along. You can train yourself to engage System 2 more deliberately, but it's exhausting. Kahneman argues the best strategy isn't trying to be rational all the time. That's impossible. The best strategy is recognizing situations where you're likely to mess up and slowing down in those moments. High-stakes decisions, unfamiliar situations, areas where bias is known to operate. There, force System 2 to wake up and check System 1's work. Wins the National Academy of Sciences Communication Award for Best Book, published in 2011. It reaches audiences far beyond psychology and economics. Business leaders read it, politicians read it, doctors read it to understand medical decision-making. Kahneman's work spreads into every domain where decisions matter, which is every domain. Biases. Other researchers suggest debiasing techniques, training programs, checklists. Kahneman is skeptical. He documents how persistent these effects are, how they survive training, how even he, after decades of studying them, still falls victim to anchoring, framing, the planning fallacy. He argues you can't fix human psychology wholesale. And what you can do is design better environments, choice architecture, nudges. Make the default option the good one. Frame information to trigger the right intuition. Structure decisions to reduce cognitive load. This becomes the foundation for applied behavioral economics. Governments create nudge units. Companies hire behavioral scientists, all building on Kahneman's insight that you can't make people rational, but you can make their environment more forgiving of irrationality. Noise. A flaw in human judgment. Co-authored with Olivier Sibony and Cass Sunstein. Kahneman is 87. The book tackles a different problem, not bias, systematic deviation in one direction, noise, random scatter. Two judges sentencing similar crimes give wildly different sentences. Two doctors diagnosing the same symptoms reach opposite conclusions. Two hiring managers evaluating identical resumes make contradictory recommendations. This scatter, this inconsistency, is often larger than bias. And it's invisible. Organizations don't measure it. When two radiologists disagree about whether a shadow on an X-ray is cancer, institutions assume both could be right, with different information. Often they're just being noisy. The book argues for decision hygiene, protocols that reduce variability. Not necessarily improving accuracy, but reducing the random scatter that makes systems unreliable. Another layer on top of the bias work. Another way human judgment fails that people didn't even realize was a problem. When researchers find his loss aversion coefficient might be context dependent, he doesn't fight it. When people demonstrate his effects don't replicate in certain conditions, he's interested rather than defensive. He treats science as a collective enterprise where being proven wrong moves knowledge forward. This attitude is rare. Many researchers get attached to their theories, defend them past the point of evidence. Kahneman seems genuinely curious about where he's mistaken. Maybe this comes from decades studying human fallibility. Hard to claim special insight when your entire body of work demonstrates how reliably everyone, including you, screws up. His second wife, Anne Treisman, died in 2018 after suffering from dementia. Kahneman sought assisted death through the Swiss organization Pegasus. Having watched Treisman's decline, he made clear plans. Richard Thaler calls him an avid pessimist. Kahneman argued worrying was rational because it reduced disappointment. Prepare for the worst, get pleasantly surprised, or simply validated, consistent with prospect theory. Losses loom larger than gains. Avoid the worst outcomes first, maximize expected value second. Rational agents. That they maximize utility, that they have consistent preferences, that they update beliefs properly with new information. All false, demonstrably false. Kahneman didn't just show this with one or two examples. He showed it with hundreds of examples, across domains, across cultures, across education levels. Nobel Prize winners, psychology professors, people who know about these biases, all still commit them. This level of evidence, this accumulation of systematic deviation from rationality, forced economics to change. Behavioral economics emerged as a recognized field in the 1980s and 90s. By 2000, it's mainstream. By 2010, it's influencing government policy in the UK, US, Australia, and dozens of other countries. Doctors told a treatment has a 90% survival rate recommend it differently than doctors told. The same treatment has a 10% mortality rate. Same information, different frame, different recommendation. The anchoring effect explains why initial salary offers matter so much in negotiations. First number thrown out becomes the reference point. Everything moves from there. The availability heuristic explains why people overestimate terrorism risk and underestimate heart disease risk. Terrorism is vivid, memorable, makes headlines. Heart disease is common, less dramatic, doesn't stick in memory the same way. Loss aversion explains why people hold losing stocks too long and sell winning stocks too quickly. Taking a loss feels like admitting defeat. Holding on creates hope the stock will rebound. Even though the rational move is to cut losses and let winners run. And System 1 is really good at creating coherent narratives from limited information. This is why conspiracy theories spread. This is why medical misdiagnosis happens. This is why eyewitness testimony is unreliable. You're not objectively reconstructing reality. You're creating a plausible story that fits available information, and then treating that story as truth. Kahneman's core insight comes back to this. Your brain didn't evolve to be correct. It evolved to be fast and good enough. In ancestral environments, the cost of false positives and false negatives wasn't symmetric. Thinking that rustling bush might be a predator when it's just wind costs you a few calories of wasted adrenaline. Thinking it's just wind when it's actually a predator costs you your life. So we evolved to be paranoid. To see patterns, even in randomness. To overestimate risks of dramatic rare events. These heuristics kept us alive. They're just terrible for modern decision-making, where the threats are abstract, probabilistic, and don't have teeth. Kahneman and Tversky documented this mismatch between ancestral design and modern demands across hundreds of experiments. Every pattern they found pointed to the same fundamental truth. You're using Stone Age hardware to solve Space Age problems. The specific questions didn't matter much. What mattered was consistency. This realization came to Kahneman years later. His first professional success was based on reducing noise, not on identifying talent. He didn't know it at the time. The system worked, but not for the reasons he thought. Coherent stories. And those stories feel true even when they're not. Kahneman spent 5 decades showing this, demonstrating it, quantifying it. And he never stopped being surprised by how robust it is, how persistent, how immune to training and education. You can know about the conjunction fallacy and still commit it. You can understand loss aversion and still feel losses more acutely than gains. You can study anchoring for 40 years and still have your estimates dragged toward irrelevant numbers. Environmental design. Because you can't fix your brain wholesale. Evolution built it to work a certain way. You're stuck with that machinery. What you can fix is the environment your brain operates in. Make it forgiving. Make good choices easy. Make bad choices hard. Structure decisions to reduce cognitive load. That's the real application of 50 years of research. Not making people rational. Making the world safer for irrationality. Daniel Kahneman never took an economics course. Everything he knew about economics, he learned from collaborators, Richard Thaler, Jack Netsch, economists who were interested in how humans actually behave, rather than how theory says they should behave. This outsider status was crucial. He wasn't defending economic orthodoxy. He was testing it empirically, and it failed. Repeatedly, spectacularly, in ways that were both replicable and predictable. This is why they gave a psychologist the Nobel Prize in economics, because he changed economics more than most economists do. He showed that the entire edifice of rational choice theory rests on assumptions about human cognition that are empirically false. That's not a small contribution. That's a paradigm shift. Thomas Kuhn would recognize it. When the foundational assumptions of your discipline turn out to be wrong, everything built on those assumptions needs rebuilding. Usually good enough, just not reliably correct. Kahneman showed us this. Not with opinion, with data, with experiments anyone can replicate, with findings so robust they survive 40 years of scrutiny and motivated criticism. Where telling a good story beats doing the calculation, that world shaped your brain. And now you're trying to use that brain for modern decisions it wasn't built to handle. Long-term planning, abstract risk assessment, probability judgments, economic choices with delayed consequences. Your System 1 keeps serving up intuitions shaped by ancestral environments, and your System 2 is too lazy and too slow to override them most of the time. This is the trap. You can't easily escape it. You can only understand it. And understanding is the first step, not to fixing your judgment, but to designing a world that accounts for your judgment's predictable failures. That's what Kahneman taught us, not how to be rational, but how to survive our irrationality. The tendency to underestimate time, costs, and risks while overestimating benefits. In 1994, psychologists Roger Buehler and Dale Griffin run the definitive study. 37 psychology students. They ask, how long will your senior thesis take? Average estimate is 33.9 days. They push further. Best case scenario, if everything goes perfectly, 27.4 days. Worst case, if everything goes wrong, 48.6 days. Then they track actual completion times. Average is 55.5 days. 30% finish within their predicted time. 70% blow past even their worst case estimate. These are psychology students. They know about cognitive biases. They've experienced thesis writing before. Doesn't matter. They still think this time will be different. Australian government wants an opera house. Original estimate, $7 million. Completion in 1963. 6 years. Reality, construction finishes in 1973. 10 years late. Final cost is $102 million. The design wasn't even finalized when construction started. Political pressure, public excitement, rushed timeline, every warning sign ignored. And this wasn't some amateur project. Professional architects, government oversight, expert engineers, still massively wrong. Because the planning fallacy doesn't discriminate, it hits students writing papers, it hits governments building monuments, Kahneman documents this pattern across domains. Writers chronically underestimate book completion times. Scientists underestimate research timelines. Companies underestimate product development. Always the same pattern. Ignore past data. Focus on this project's unique features. Imagine best case scenario. Predict accordingly. End up wrong. Coherence does. And System 1 is really good at creating coherent narratives from limited information. This is why conspiracy theories spread. This is why medical misdiagnosis happens. This is why eyewitness testimony is unreliable. You're not objectively reconstructing reality. You're creating a plausible story that fits available information, and then treating that story as truth. The framing effect isn't just academic. It changes medical decisions. Doctors told a treatment has a 90% survival rate recommend it differently than doctors told the same treatment has a 10% mortality rate. Same information, different frame, different recommendation. Patients make opposite choices based solely on whether you emphasize survival or death. The anchoring effect explains why initial salary offers matter so much in negotiations. First number thrown out becomes the reference point. Everything moves from there. A hiring manager throws out $70,000. Candidate was thinking $80,000. Now they're negotiating around $70,000. If the manager had stayed quiet, the candidate might have anchored at $80,000, $20,000 difference from one number. He never claimed people were stupid. He claimed they used heuristics, shortcuts, rules of thumb, which work most of the time, but fail systematically in specific situations, and we're overconfident about when those situations are. That's the real danger, not that we're irrational, that we're irrationally confident in our rationality. Kahneman punctured that confidence, showed us exactly where and how we fail, made it undeniable. March 27, 2024, the man who mapped human irrationality dies at 90, but his maps remain. The biases he named, the heuristics he documented, the theories he built, they're not going anywhere, because they're not about him, they're about us. Every human carrying a brain built for a Pleistocene savanna and trying to navigate a modern world. We're all Daniel Kahneman's subjects now, all falling for the Linda problem. All anchoring on irrelevant numbers, all overweighting losses relative to gains. The research continues, the replications pile up, but the core insight stands. 50 years of data, one unavoidable conclusion. You don't think the way you think you think. Do they have consistent preferences? Test it. Do they update beliefs rationally? Test it. And when the answer came back no, he didn't rationalize it away. He documented it, quantified it, built theories to explain it, tested those theories, updated them when they failed. This is basic science, but applied to human judgment, it was revolutionary, because we have deep intuitions about how we think, and those intuitions are mostly wrong. Kahneman showed this not by arguing about philosophy, but by running experiments, simple experiments, clear results, replicable findings. That's how you change minds, not with cleverness, with evidence. Overwhelming, undeniable evidence, accumulated over decades, from thousands of studies by hundreds of researchers, all confirming the same basic patterns. Humans are predictably irrational in specific ways for identifiable reasons. Kahneman mapped that territory. Now we all live in it, aware of the traps, still falling into them, but at least we know the territory. That's something. That's more than we had before 1968, when two Israeli psychologists started arguing about whether humans are intuitive statisticians. Turned out the answer was no. Turned out we're something much stranger. We're storytellers who mistake our stories for truth. Kahneman showed us this, gently, with data, with humor, with the intellectual humility to include himself among the fallible. That's his legacy. Not that he was right, but that he showed us how often we're wrong, and did it with such precision we couldn't look away. All stemming from afternoons in Jerusalem when two men invented gambling problems and tested their intuitions. That's the power of asking simple questions about complex phenomena. That's the impact of actually checking whether human behavior matches human theory. It doesn't. Kahneman proved it, again and again and again, for 50 years, until the evidence became undeniable, until economics changed, until we all changed how we think about thinking. That's genius, not having all the answers, but asking the right questions and actually looking for the answers, even when the answers make you uncomfortable, especially when they make you uncomfortable, because the uncomfortable truths are the ones we need most. The ones we avoid thinking about, the ones that only surface when someone has the discipline to test them empirically. Daniel Kahneman had that discipline for 5 decades. That changed everything. Not because he wanted to change everything, but because reality kept proving human rationality was a myth, and he kept reporting what he found. That's the work. That's the legacy. A lifetime of showing us who we really are, not who we wish we were, who we actually are, predictably, systematically, irrationally, human.